entrepreneurs are so nimble. They're in the best possible position to react to this and really be of service and value right now.
It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is the one and only Elaine Pofeldt. She is the author of the amazing book, The $1 Million One-Person Business. Elaine, I've been looking forward to speaking with you again. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, to be back, I enjoyed this interview.
Let's kick things off kind of where we did last time, and that is with, although a little bit shorter, the elevator pitch version of the Elaine Pofeldt origin story for the benefit of the listeners, the viewers who are encountering you for the first time in our talk today. What are a few things they need to know about you?
Sure, Shaun. I'm a journalist. I've been covering entrepreneurship and careers for a long time. I was a senior editor at Fortune Small Business Magazine, and then I went freelance in 2007, and now I frequently write for Forbes and CNBC. I'm a book author, and I wrote this book, The $1 Million One-Person Business, and I'm the author of an upcoming book for Norton called Tiny Business, Big Money, which looks at businesses with small teams, the next step beyond the $1 million one-person business. So I'm so glad to be back and talk about entrepreneurship and everything else with you, Shaun.
I was kind of intrigued when you had emailed me and said you had just sold this book to Norton. I didn't even realize Norton had a publishing imprint. You know, as an old school IT guy, I think of Norton as antivirus and internet security. But now that I think about it, yes, they have had a publishing arm through the years.
It's funny. I didn't make that connection, actually. The imprint that I sold it to does a variety of different types of books, not just entrepreneurship. They do a lot of lifestyle books too. So I'm excited to be on board with them.
One of the things that made me think of you last week was that I know you have the pulse of a lot of small businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs. And so one of the things I was curious about in terms of what you're seeing as you're writing and researching, how did some of the small businesses you follow, how did they pivot as a result of COVID-19?
Very quickly. I think I've been in touch with a lot of the entrepreneurs from the $1 Million One-Person Business, in part because it just happened to coincide, the whole crisis, with the updating of the book. It's going into paperback in January 2021. So I had to go back to everyone and see, are you still a one-person business and what are you doing now? And a lot of them have looked at what the market needs right now and shifted their offerings. And this includes some of the people I've discovered since writing the book. So for instance, one woman I've interviewed for Forbes, Elisa Shiro, is a meeting planner. Think about an industry that's been harder hit than meetings, and you probably can't find one. She was doing a lot of live meetings. She pivoted into virtual meetings, and I've kept in touch with her throughout the crisis. The first few days, she was kind of figuring out how to reposition herself. And then she dived right into the whole virtual meeting area and said, it's long overdue. I should have been immersing myself in this anyway, and started bringing in celebrities to corporations' quarterly meetings. She found a niche at meetings that were already happening on Zoom, but droning on and on. People were really bored with them and made them exciting. So I saw that happen very quickly. She didn't wait 3 weeks. She did it within a few days. Another entrepreneur I've written about, Sean Kelly, is a young entrepreneur. He left Rutgers University to pursue his $1 Million One-Person Business, which is selling jerseys with rappers' pictures or brands on them. And he reached out to the musicians because he was a college kid and he couldn't afford the licenses for sports jerseys. So he did the next best thing, and he liked music. And what he's pivoted into is selling masks right now because nobody's really buying those jerseys. I wouldn't say nobody, but fewer people are. So he thought, well, what do people need? And he's reached out to hospitals. He secured some supply. He's doing that. Interestingly, another entrepreneur from the book, Harry Ein, he runs Perfection Promo, which sells swag. So pens with a company's name on them at meetings and events. Well, that was frozen. He also pivoted into selling masks because he's got great selling skills. And he had to do a little bit of digging to find supply because that isn't what he normally has in stock. But now he's really going fast in that industry. It's been really interesting. I've also seen some interesting experiments with pricing. One of the businesses in the book, Soxy, sells colorful men's socks for people who don't want to wear just a boring business suit or, boring business casual. And they're kind of a novelty. So they wanted to make sure that they maintain their sales. And what they've done is a 3-tiered pricing system where you can pay full price and give the socks to a first responder, like a nurse or somebody along those lines, and you get a pair for yourself. Or you can take a 10% discount and it goes towards certain things in the business, or you can take a 20% discount or 45%. So it makes it affordable for all price points. Usually it's kind of a luxury gift. They would be priced higher than most socks, but they decided for this COVID-19 crisis, they can give back and also make it accessible to more customers. And they said that was going well. So I do see a lot of innovation going on in how they think.
I guess a follow-up to that would be thinking of small businesses, entrepreneurs throughout history. I think we can look back in the past, whether we're talking about the Great Depression or what we saw emerge after different world wars. We would enter these seasons of unprecedented creativity, innovation, startups, and small business growth. And so I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that will be on the horizon for 2020 and beyond as well. I'd love to get your take, your perspective on that. Are we entering a season of unprecedented small business growth?
That's a really good question, Shaun. I think we're going to lose some small businesses first, right? There are some that just didn't have the cash reserves to withstand closing a brick and mortar business for a long time. Or maybe they do, but the owner is closer to retirement age and doesn't want to spend the next 5 years rebuilding a business. They'd rather cash out at whatever price they can get for the business and move on to the next phase of their life. That said, yes, I do think so. And I think the area is going to be an opening up because there are a few things on people's minds. First of all is they miss going to the places that they like, but they also want to be safe. So how do you reopen a restaurant where people do want to come back, but they also don't want to be sitting next to somebody who gives them COVID-19? And I think there's going to be a lot of innovation in design. That's something that a one-person business can do, by the way. Coming up with new ways to design physical places where we do business or stores, right? We can go online, but I actually miss going to the store. I have 3 teenage daughters and we like going shopping together, right? And it's not the same shopping online together as it is just all getting in the car and going somewhere. So I think there's a lot of people that just like to get out of the house and do something here and there. So how do you make shopping in a boutique? How do you make that comfortable for people? There's going to have to be innovation in terms of things like the HVAC system even. How do you make sure you're not circulating bad air and making your employees sick? How do you make sure you maintain social distancing without fights breaking out between the customers and the clerks? Because we see there's already that type of conflict taking place. How do you design things so that doesn't happen? I think there's so many opportunities in the marketplace to really make the transition go well. Also in terms of messaging, because people want reassurance. They want to know what you're doing. If you're doing things to keep them safe right now, that's a job for marketing professionals. How do you strike the right tone? What is the signage in the store? How do you make people feel good when they come in and not worried, but also reassure them? I think there's just a tremendous opportunity for creativity if you lean into what people need and want right now, and you really understand their emotions too, which are changing by the minute, by the way. I think entrepreneurs are so nimble. They're in the best possible position to react to this and really be of service and value right now.
I had a conversation with Brian Solis recently, and I asked him some of the similar questions that I'm asking you. And one of the things he commented on was once you reach like 66 days approximately is when something is very much rewritten in your brain to the point where it's just automatic. It's second nature. You're not necessarily thinking about things. And so we have kind of crossed this interesting threshold in terms of new habits and experiences and being taken out of your routine, how people move forward, how they do everything. It's just going to shift merely by, the fact that they've been forced to be in this changed state for so long. One of the things I'm thinking about a lot in terms of the publishing industry, I work in the Christian publishing niche, are the concerns, the needs, the felt needs of my audience. Are they the same as they were 6 months ago? What are they now? What are they 6 months from now? And so really trying to think through as we're acquiring new projects. Can we acquire the same book we would have acquired a year ago, even though it fits with our niche? Or is that really going to meet the needs of our customers and their concerns in the year ahead? So I think in terms of even existing businesses where we're trying to figure out the best way forward and how do we acquire content that will reach our audience, we've got a lot to think through in terms of what are the actual felt needs of our customers in the weeks and months ahead.
I think you're so right about it. It was really interesting for me to think about my book and updating it. Was the information still relevant? And what I found was in many cases, I did add what the business was doing in response to COVID-19, because I think there are a lot of good business lessons that were learned by the entrepreneurs in the book in real time. As I was updating it, I was thinking about the virtual aspect that has been added to many businesses. And I know, like, my yoga studio does what a lot of yoga studios and fitness studios are doing right now. They added a live stream to the program so that you could continue. And they've had 6 classes a day. It's not a huge yoga school, so it's pretty amazing to me that they've pulled that off with the teachers that they have. And I thought, why don't they keep that? People like going to the yoga studio to socialize and for other reasons, and maybe you'd be more motivated in person. But what if you can't go during the hours that they have it? Or you can barely make it out of work and you're about to miss the class? Wouldn't you rather just go home and take the class on a live stream? So I thought that would be a great way for them to add value, and for people that pay by the class to bring in additional revenue if you're not getting a monthly membership. So I think we can all think about that in terms of what do people need, but what did we add during COVID-19 that we want to keep and that will add to our revenue streams and give us some diversification too, in terms of where our customers come from. Maybe the virtual customer is not the same person who goes to the yoga studio or whatever it is that you offer.
One thing to be very conscious of, a lot of people continue working from home for the foreseeable future, or some, maybe permanently, they'll transition to permanent at-home work. My sister-in-law, she lives about a block and a half away from us. She's a voice teacher, a piano teacher. And the way she pivoted is she does all of her lessons over Zoom now. So she does piano lessons with my daughters over Zoom. She does voice lessons with the other people who go to her for that over Zoom. And so her business was 100% in person before the COVID-19 outbreak. And now she's pivoted and it's 100% virtual, at least for the time being. So she can continue serving her clients and still continue earning income for her family. And so thanks to Zoom, that's actually possible.
It's such a great idea. It's funny because a few years back, I wrote about, it was a specific app for music teachers where if they had access to high-speed internet, they could teach group classes. And I thought, once you transition to doing things virtually, then the next step is scaling it. So if you're teaching 20 students at a time as opposed to one, think of what that does to your business in terms of growth without you spending additional hours in the business. That might be something for people to think about now that we've all gotten our feet wet with every sort of Zoom-like app there is, probably, right? We all know how to use these things. So how do you take it to the next level? That also might be an offering that's more affordable to people, because I know, like, you and I both have big families. And I remember at one point, my children were learning piano and they were part of a group class, and it was more cost effective for us to do it that way. Now my daughter is the only one who does piano, so she has a one-person lesson. But that's something that maybe the customers would appreciate, who feel like they could still get good instruction. Maybe it's not quite the same as one-on-one, but they also maybe would like the interaction of the group. So we can all think about these things. How do I go one step further with this? And if you have no idea, ask your kids, because they'll tell you. They'll figure it out for you. I always go to my son, who's 10, and he's got a zillion ideas.
I love that idea. And in terms of the group class, if I look at marketing and sales funnels and other ideas, a lot of times you'll have one offering and then an offering that's the next step up. And many times that initial offering is to kind of whet somebody's appetite for the more premium version of the thing, whatever the widget is. And I think in the same way, you could offer an entry-level series of group classes. And then as people progress and get to a certain point, the group class is only going to get them so far. And they would naturally progress and be bought in enough to want to do that one person at a time class. It might cost a premium price, but that's the stage they're at. So I think you're definitely onto something in terms of people who teach that sort of a class. They could certainly scale that into a range of offerings that feed into their more traditional class structures in the past.
I think so. The other thing is with the virtual teaching, there are going to be some teachers that maybe are exposed to a lot of students who, as we transition back, aren't fully ready to have a full course load of germy kids coming into their home, right? I mean, we all know, like you and I, we catch everything, right? Because our kids are in a zillion classes. And so I think if I was in one of the risk groups, I wouldn't necessarily want to dive right back into that full level of contact. So that might be a way to transition back where you have the people that you know really well who will be very honest with you about whether the kid is sick or not. You'll have them come back first, and then the people you know less well, maybe work with on Zoom a little bit longer until you build more of a working relationship with them. So that's another thing to think about, because I know there are people that are very anxious about health conditions and that sort of thing. And that's a very real worry. But if you have to run a business, you're going to have to find some way to manage the situation. And virtual really is working pretty well. My daughter's also she's doing FaceTime lessons with her teacher right now. And it's worked pretty well. It's not exactly the same as when she goes over to her house, but because they've worked together for a long time, there's a lot of good communication that still takes place. So we feel happy with it. So I would encourage everyone to think about that.
Elaine, you had mentioned that the $1 million one-person business is going to be converting to paperback, as we would say in the industry, coming up in January of 2021. Now, this is a revised edition, so I'd love to hear briefly, what were some of the things that you wanted to be sure you updated in this new edition?
By popular request, I added a number of new case studies on professional services firms. It seems like for most people, that's the hardest battle, getting to 1 million, because you get into this whole thing of trading time for money. And it's hard to break out of that project-based mindset. So among the case studies, one is Steve Ferreira, who is an auditor. He runs a company called Ocean Audit. He worked in the shipping industry for his whole career. He was a corporate guy. And what he discovered was when a company like JCPenney orders 50,000 shirts from overseas, there might be a very big mistake on the bill for the shipping. And this is public information. He can search it on a site called Panjiva. And because he knew the industry well, he could easily identify what those errors were. He would go to the companies and say, I found a $250,000 error on your shipping bill, and I'll identify it for you and collect it, but you will have to pay me a commission of 50%, right? Other people in the industry have worked hourly. Think about how little he would make if he worked hourly compared to what he gets when he gets a 50% commission. So he's at just under 2 million in revenue. He's a dad. He lives outside of Hartford, Connecticut. He works out of a co-working space, and he's a solo. And this is how he does it. And the way he finds the clients, he has a copywriting team that helps him with his LinkedIn reach to executives. So they're really great writers, and they help him craft messages that he sends to CFOs and people like that to get an initial conversation going. And one interesting thing he found was during COVID-19, everybody's been online so much more that he's been reaching people that he would have hoped to get through years ago. And now he finally can reach them, and they're getting back to him. So that's one model, is a commission model. And it's not a conventional one for his industry, but he thought outside the usual thinking and built himself a really beautiful business. Another method kind of taps into the software as a service mindset. And this was used by Jamie J, who you might know from podcasting circles. He used to do Slapshot Studios, and now he's doing a different podcast, but he does custom podcasts. And I profiled him for Forbes. He was a mid-six-figure business. And I reached out to him for something else. I had a question about podcasting. And he said, Elaine, you know those businesses you write about in your book? He's like, well, I've become one. And I said, that is so awesome. What did you do? And as with most of these businesses, it's not just one button you push. There were a few moving parts. So he created a virtual team. They're assistants in the Philippines for the most part, that one of them is a single point of contact for each custom podcast client, who then assigns projects to the other members of the team. So for instance, if you need those little icons that you promote a podcast with on the internet, on your social media, the graphic designer creates those. There might be another technical person working on the actual recording, but the customer only deals with one assistant. So it's consistent. And he has a flat fee where he charges X amount per month to have access to the whole team rather than one-off projects. And they do it really well. So he gets a lot of positive write-ups and positive ratings on websites that are industry specific that rank podcast agencies. And with all these things moving together, he started going up in the Google rankings and started getting a lot of people reaching out to him who saw his good ratings, who turned out to be more profitable clients than the ones he was getting through normal referrals. So that is what all in tandem helped him get to 1 million. I thought it was really interesting because a lot of times people think it's like, you just push this button and amplify. And it's like if he had done the same thing, but the service was poor, then the other part of it wouldn't have worked. He would have not gotten the Google rankings and he wouldn't have gotten those profitable clients. So you have to be able to deliver and execute. And another part of it was that he really documented his processes. So when he found something that worked, he kind of standardized it within the company. But at the same time, if one of the assistants discovered something in these rules was not working, they were free to revise them and tell everybody that this would work better, because he didn't want it to be just everything coming from on high. He wants people to use their minds. They're working with the customer. They're trying things in real time. That was also helpful to documenting his processes and then making sure that everybody consistently used them. So every customer was getting basically the same experience. So that's another business model, is like a monthly, I guess it's a retainer model, but it's a team retainer. It's not him doing all the work and running himself ragged with a zillion retainer clients that he's juggling and never really able to serve because one person can't do it. He has a team, but they're virtual. They have other stuff that they do also.
It's almost time for us to wrap up, but I want to make sure we take a moment to touch on your forthcoming book, which at this time is titled Tiny Business, Big Money. And I'd love to hear a little bit about where will that book kind of pick up where the $1 million one-person business leaves off.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm happy to talk about it. It's coming out September 2022. So I'm in the thick of writing it right now. And what it does, Shaun, is it takes us a step beyond the $1 million one-person business. These are all 7-figure businesses, but they're micro businesses. They have tiny teams by design. They're in the stage where they're still depending on the resources of the owner. They don't have venture capital. They don't have massive bank loans and that sort of thing. It's still basically a very small business, but it looks at how do you build a team? How do you really find great contractors so that you can actually go be a digital nomad when we're allowed to fly again and not worry that everything is falling apart? And we touched on that a little bit with Jamie. How do you build a culture? Because I get that question a lot. People say, I have 3 people. How do I build a culture around that? We want there to be a vibe to this company because otherwise it's kind of isolating. And it's different when it's 3 or 10 people than it is when it's 50 people. You don't have the budget to do what Google does, even at 50 people. So what is the vibe, and how do you motivate people and tap into their special talents and gifts in that small of a business and keep it at over 7 figures? You don't want it to be a struggling tiny business. It's also a lifestyle business, right? These folks, I'm very interested in businesses that allow people to really live their life and not just be working all the time. So it looks at that also. And there's more than 40 new profiles that I found. Some of them have some similarities to the $1 million one-person business in terms of their ultra resourcefulness, but they do work with teams. So that's really the difference.
Elaine, I just got to say, when I think of all the different sorts of businesses you've described, I feel like Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek was kind of prophetic for what could be possible. And I think when Tim's book came out back in the day, our ability to have virtual teams and do all of those sorts of things, it was out there, but it was hard. And our ability right now to scale and use virtual teams, and really in some regard, things we're learning to do just by necessity, being stuck at home, that's much more widely available than it was when you originally released $1 million one-person business. I mean, this should be more possible today than it's ever been before.
Oh, definitely. And the talent that's out there now and that is reachable is incredible. That was always the challenge. Is I'm an editor, so I know a lot of freelancers in my field, but there are a lot of fields that really weren't that freelance oriented. And people would say, I'd love to find a contractor who does whatever it is. but they have no idea how to find them and they have no idea how to work with them. Now you can find them all over the world or in your own backyard. I mean, it could be someone 2 houses down from you in the USA, and who has some spare time and is the perfect talent for what you need to do. So I'm going to be looking at that. What are the successful ways to work with people? This is a way of working that's very voluntary and collaborative. And I think a lot of the old ways of running companies they were very top down and boss worker, and there was a lot of inherent conflict. But I find as a freelancer, and I know you're familiar with this world too, I really enjoy working with my clients. I don't feel like I'm at odds with them. I feel like we're both growing our businesses together when they farm work out to me. And if I do it successfully for them, it helps us both. And I think there's sort of a joy in that comes out in these businesses. But the rule book for the old type of corporate business where, no one really likes their boss and the boss is kind of, really tough on everybody, that doesn't work in this world. It really doesn't work. And just the rules of, as far as what times of day people have to work. I mean, who really cares what time they work as long as they're available when you need to work with them? All these things have to be thought about, right? Because you need some order in the business too. And if you don't want to work every hour, how do you manage all this stuff? So I'm going to be really diving into that with people because they're very thoughtful about these things and they share a lot of information as a community. So it should be a fun book to write.
And Elaine, for the listeners who'd like to connect with you, find out more about what you do, where are some of the places we can find you on the web?
LinkedIn is a good place. Facebook, Twitter, all under my full name, which I'm sure is in the show notes. I won't spell it out here. Or my website, elainepofeldt.com, is a good place to use the contact box. I do write back, so feel free. And as a journalist, I really do like to know what is on the minds of people that want to start a business or are running one now. So there's really no question that's too small for me to get. So I just want to really invite people to get in touch.
Well, like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, all the places where you can connect with Elaine and pick up and in some cases pre-order copies of her amazing books. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Elaine Pofeldt. Again, let me reiterate, head on out and pre-order your very own copy of the revised edition of The $1 Million One-Person Business. Again, if you'd like to connect with Elaine, either connect with her on social media or head on over to her website at elainepofeldt.com. And Elaine, I just want to say thanks so much for sharing with us today. It's truly been an honor and a joy to have you back in the show.
Thank you so much, Shaun. I always love your questions. You're such a great host. Thank you.